Fresh new GOP primary numbers are out, and there's something in here for everyone. Here are today's Trump and DeSantis matchup numbers. Now, clearly, it's the Republican numbers that matter the most, but this gives you a good idea about how the candidates might do relative to each other in the general. Donald Trump beats Ron DeSantis among all voters, but only by 1 point. DeSantis also picks up quite a bit more support than some other candidate. Here are today's numbers charted with every other time we've asked about Trump versus DeSantis. DeSantis does better than he ever has among all voters, and Trump doesn't quite match his 40% maximum. And clearly over time, it looks like DeSantis has mostly just picked up support from other candidates. All 6 times we've asked, DeSantis has only beaten Trump once among all voters, back in the beginning of February, which was pretty much Trump's bottom in all of our polling. Also look very closely at these dates here. These are the ones where DeSantis does best. What's the difference? In those questions, the choice was only between Trump, DeSantis, and other candidate, whereas on the other 4 dates, at least one other Republican challenger was listed. Keep that in mind as we look at the Republican numbers. And here we are, 58% of Republicans support Trump and 30% support DeSantis. So Trump is still winning by nearly a 2-to-1 margin. Only 12% say either not sure or some other candidate. So any other Republican candidates out there thinking of getting into the race, take note. Here's the chart, and I'm really not sure how the DeSantis campaign should see these numbers. He has certainly had a post-announcement bounce, improving by about 17 points since mid-May, when Trump absolutely stomped DeSantis 62% to 17% among Republicans, the most Trump has ever led by. But a lot of the gain came from other candidates, and Trump only lost 4 points among Republican voters since May. But again, here we're highlighting the 2 days, which were the only direct matchups. And DeSantis is actually doing 15 points worse than he was just about 3.5 months ago. I feel like this really needs to be explained more. The biggest factor seems not to be the bounce that DeSantis got from his announcement, but whether we give survey respondents the choice between just DeSantis or Trump, or the entire GOP primary slate. Now, each question does have its uses. But DeSantis does worse when we give voters the choice between Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Mike Pence, and any of the others. And the fact remains, that's much closer to the choice that voters actually are going to have in the GOP primary. Here's the chart again, and to reiterate, although DeSantis has had a bump and performs better than he did back in May, he's still losing handily and doing 15 points worse than the only other time we asked this exact same question, in February. Here's some good news for the DeSantis camp. Ron beats Don by 9 points among independents, though I think it's fair to say that the important number is a total of 59% of independents would pick either DeSantis or Trump, and whichever one wins will probably wind up leading Biden by about 15 points in our polls, at least up until 6 months before the general. Here are Ron DeSantis' favorability numbers, and he's scoring 49%, which isn't great, but still about 5 points higher than where Biden is polling today. But here's the first of the really bad news for the DeSantis campaign. His announcement seems to have had an incredibly negative impact on his favorability numbers, and he has a lot of work to do right out of the gate to restore his brand damage with Republicans. Here are the changes in DeSantis' favorability since mid-November. He's down 5 points among all voters, and unfortunately it seems like most of that is coming from Republicans. He's down a total of 8 points among Republicans, but his very favorable rating is down an astounding 22 points. And even worse, Trump's latest favorability numbers look a lot more like what Ron DeSantis had in November. DeSantis is down 12 points among independents, and he has a 17-point worse very favorable rating. He's only doing better among Democrats, but he's only up 6 points there. Here's another one. How likely is it that Ron DeSantis will win the Republican nomination? 48% say at least somewhat likely, but only 12% say very likely. 42% say not likely, but only 15% say not at all likely. Here are the party numbers, and these can't be confidence building. Only 54% of Republicans think it's likely that DeSantis will be the nominee, and only 10% of them say very likely. Only 9 points more Republicans than Democrats say it's likely that DeSantis will be going head-to-head with Biden, and Democrats are most likely to think it's a strong possibility. But what's fascinating to me is that DeSantis' likelihood of being the Republican nominee isn't really a gender, race, education, or even Biden approval thing. It's mostly an age thing. 62% of 18 to 39-year-olds think it's likely DeSantis will be the nominee, and 22% say very likely, the most of any other group except those who earn more than $200,000 a year. Only 38% of voters over 65 think it's likely that DeSantis is going to be the nominee, and they're most likely to be getting their news from less pro-Trump cable and network TV news sources. But here's the last question, and probably the most important. DeSantis now ties Biden in a 2024 matchup. Here are the results, and it's a dead heat at 44%. Only 8% say some other candidate, and 4% say not sure. This should be pretty troubling because the one other time we asked, only about 2 months ago, Ron DeSantis beat Biden by 8 points, 1 point more than Trump, by a margin of 46% to 38%, and 16% of voters were either not sure or picked some other candidate. So clearly, almost all 4 points of those undecided broke towards Biden. Now, let's dig into the details. There's a lot of ways we could look at the numbers, but I think the most interesting would be to compare the demographics that DeSantis now does worse in than he did just 2 months ago. Normally I show just the top and bottom of the list, but there really isn't a top to this list. He's lost ground with almost everyone except some random income brackets, and he's unchanged with some of the more entrenched demographics like older, white, middle-class voters. But the bottom of the list is not good. Back in April, we compared DeSantis versus Biden and Trump versus Biden results to see where DeSantis' incremental support was coming from. And we noted that it was coming from a lot of places that would be unlikely to stick it out. And we were absolutely 100% right. Since announcing, DeSantis has lost an astounding 27% of 18 to 39-year-old support, 24% and 22% among Hispanic and Black voters. He's lost support at the low end of the income spectrum, but also some higher income voters. And he even lost 15 points among those with graduate degrees. Now, I thought there would be a big party signal here, but he's doing 10 points worse with both Republicans and Democrats. Let's look at this one more way, a change in the party signals. Back in April, DeSantis had a 20-point crossover advantage. What do I mean by that? Well, he led Biden among Republicans by 68 points, but he trailed Biden among Democrats by 48%. But in today's numbers, he leads among Republicans by 58 points, but trails among Democrats by 58 points as well, meaning that 20-point advantage between parties is now totally gone. The implication is that Democrats were much more likely to say they'd vote for him when they knew he wasn't a candidate. Are these numbers crippling for DeSantis? Absolutely not. It's still really early in the cycle. Back in the beginning of 2015, our numbers had Romney leading the pack by 26%, Jeb Bush in second at 14%, and Scott Walker in third at 11%. Trump was nowhere in sight yet. Do you have any comments, theories, or 2024 related questions you'd like us to ask? If so, post them in the YouTube comments. And while you're there, like the video and subscribe to our channel. It helps our videos be seen by more people. And also, then you'll get notified when our next video, a recap of all of our election fraud polling, gets dropped on YouTube. Thanks for watching.